Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have used this old t-shirt to create a crop top with a lettuce hem. This t-shirt had a stain that wouldn't come out and I didn't want to throw it away, so I decided to make this top. So let's get into it. First I laid the t-shirt out inside out so the right sides of the fabric were facing each other and made sure everything was laying flat. Next I took a top that I already owned and used this as a template for my new one. I laid this onto my t-shirt and once I was happy with the placement, I drew around it, adding half an inch to the top and sides for seam allowance, and a couple of inches onto the bottom as I wanted my new top to be longer than the one I was using as a template. Once I'd done that, I cut along the line I had just drawn. This is how it looked. I only needed one piece of fabric to have these top pieces for the front of the top, so I drew a straight line across one piece of the fabric where these top pieces ended, and cut along this line, making sure I was only cutting through the top layer of the fabric. This piece would be the back piece of my crop top. Next, I pinned these two pieces together along the side seams. Once everything was pinned in place, I sewed where I'd pinned, using a zigzag stitch and a half-inch seam allowance. This is how it looked once it was sewn. I then needed to hem all of the top edges. For this I decided not to sew them, but you can sew them if you wanted to. Instead, I used something called hemming web. This allows you to hem fabric quickly and easily using heat instead of sewing. I can't recommend this stuff enough. It is so easy to use and perfect for beginners. Like I said, you could always sew these edges instead. I just decided this would be quicker and easier. To do this, I measured how much of the hemming web I would need and cut it to that length. Next, I placed it onto my top, so the top edge of the web lined up with the top edge of the fabric. I then folded this edge over half an inch so the web was inside the fold and ironed this into place. I repeated this for all of the top edges. This is how it looked once all these edges were hemmed. Next, I needed to make the straps for my top. Taking what I had left of my original t-shirt, I used these long side pieces for my straps. There isn't a specific measurement for these as I am using stretchy fabric. Just make sure your pieces of fabric are long enough to reach over each of your shoulders. You should have two pieces like this. Taking one of these pieces, I folded it in half, right sides together, and pinned along the long open edge. I then repeated this for the second piece, and once I'd done that, I sewed where I'd pinned. This is how they looked once they were sewn. Then, I needed to turn these pieces inside out so they'd be the right way round. I used a safety pin to do this. Attaching it to one end of the strap, I fed the fabric back through the strap and pulled it so the right side of the fabric was now on the outside. I then repeated this for the second strap, and this is how they looked. Next, I attached the straps to the top. With the right side of the top facing up, I placed one end of one strap onto the top, right sides together, and pinned this in place. I then repeated this for the second strap and sewed them into place using a straight stitch and a half-inch seam allowance. This is how they looked once they were sewn. I then turned my top over so the back of it was facing up, and taking each strap, I tucked the end of it inside the top so the right side of the strap was against the wrong side of the top, and pinned this in place, making sure both straps were the same length. Once I'd done this for both straps, I sewed them in place using a straight stitch. This is how they looked once they were sewn. On to hemming the bottom of the crop top. For this, I decided to do a lettuce hem, but you can always hem yours normally if you wanted to. With the top inside out, I folded the bottom edge over ½ an inch and pinned this in place. I did this all the way around the bottom edge. Once everything was pinned in place, I sewed where I'd pinned. To sew a lettuce hem, you need to stretch the fabric as you sew. I have made a full in-depth video on how to sew a lettuce hem. I will leave the link to that video in the description below if you wanted to check that out. This is how it looked once it was sewn. The last thing I did was add a bit of detail to the front of the top, as I felt it looked a bit plain. But again, this is totally optional. For this, I laid my top out with the right side of the front piece facing up. I then slightly gathered the front so I had something that looked like this. I then sewed this into place. I hand sewed this as I felt I'd have more control this way, but you can use a machine if you wanted to. Once I'd done that, the top was complete, and this is how it looked. I really liked how it looked and I think it's perfect for summer. The lettuce hem and the gather at the front make it a bit different from a regular crop top and a perfect addition to my wardrobe. This top is a great way to reuse old clothes, giving an old t-shirt a new lease of life. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.